Well, hello. Um, I was just reflecting on the human condition or my own condition, and the woman who was just out here was on high heels, which looked impossible, and I have trouble just walking, and like the full catastrophe of it all. I think I've spoken at each of the Wahasus, and I feel very lucky and delighted that that's true. It's lovely to be reminded of the multiplicity of ways that we think about and talk about happiness, from therapy to business to how's the earth doing, which I loved, how's the earth doing? Is it happy? My little corner of this universe is forgiveness. I was a graduate student when Martin Seligman promoted his APA thing on happiness and positive psychology, and it literally transformed my world. I was teaching and studying at Stanford, and there was no traction whatsoever for, well, I'm interested in what's good about people, not just what's wrong with them. I have a PhD in psychology. And before that, there was no schema for that whole field, because we as therapists and researchers, we were the high priests of misery, how miserable are you? Well, come see us, and it's like, are you wretched? Oh, good, we love you. And are you angry and bitter and, all sorts of stuff? That's us. But I have two therapeutic licenses and an educational credential, and nobody said a word about having anybody be happy or teach them about love or kindness. I have a PhD from Stanford, and I have a master's degree from the California State University system, and nope. There was no interest in what is absolutely the most important thing about being a human being. It's loving and connecting with other human beings. That's what we get in this brief life. We get us. Literally, that's all we get. We get us. And in another whatever, there'll be different groups of us sitting in this thing, and there'll be different people like me standing on a stage, but it'll all be this ball spinning in space, and we get a chance to connect with each other and maybe make this earth a little nicer place to be on earth. And that's what you get in this lifetime. That's that's not only the deep purpose, but that's what makes us happy. I mean, the research is abundant about that. People and purpose and savoring. That's what we get here. We get others, we get to do something, and if we're lucky, we have enough safety and enough goodness that we can savor the experiences that we have. And most everything else is epiphenomenon. It's not really that real. I can take a vacation to Lake Como, but without people, purpose, and savoring, it's just stuff. So, interestingly enough, I tried to and started teaching the positive psych happiness course at Stanford, I think in 2008. It's hard to believe how long ago that was. And my partner and I got so little traction on it in terms of trying to get a department at Stanford to allow us to do this, that it was hard to believe. The biology department told us, well, this has nothing to do with home bio. The psychology department said, well, what does this have to do with psychology? And the education department says, well, what does this have to do with education? It was quite an uphill challenge. We got the Department of Pediatrics to sponsor us. I can't quite figure that out, except that my partner's boss was a pediatrician. So I know what it's like to be in a world that doesn't understand the desperate need we all have to be happier. The basic primal craving we have to connect with other people and live a life of meaning. That's what we get. And it's inside of all of us, and it can't be stopped, and it's part of our expression as human beings. It's one of the things we share with every other human being on this planet. No matter what race, color, creed, religion, ethnicity, whatever you define yourself as, there's something in there that says it may manifest itself differently, but I need to have mattered to some human beings. They need to have mattered to me, and I need to do something here that's of help to somebody, somewhere, somehow. And that's the field that we're all here talking about. People and purpose. The little tiny subsection of that universe that I half chose and half got thrust at me is forgiveness. It's making peace when life sucks. That's my professional definition. The making peace when life sucks study, but that's what it is. It's making peace when life sucks, and that part inside of you, that part of you that wants meaning and purpose and connection, also craves peace. It craves to be okay and centered and alive, but inside of you safe in a world that is incredibly dangerous and full of threat. And so our deepest pulls are always challenging and never easy, always. Because those pulls to have connection and meaning and find enough equanimity in our experiences are at odds with how difficult this life is. Just how unbelievably difficult it is to take a birth in a body that over time will decay and end. So right there, you got a tough thing. I mean, even if nothing else ever happened to you, the fact that you and everybody else you have ever known will pass on is enormous difficulty. So let me try to explain what forgiveness is. So for this, I'm going to ask you to please close your eyes. Not because I don't want you to see me, but that's okay too. But close your eyes for just a moment. And I'm going to ask you to take a slow breath inside and out. Inside and out of your abdomen. Quiet, slow, deep breath. And what I'd like is that you can practice being safe enough by relaxing that abdomen and not holding tension in it. So right now, this is an in vivo centering practice. Relax. Be okay with your eyes closed. Very, very gently and quietly breathe. And make sure when you inhale, your abdomen expands. Make sure. And that is all I want you to do is picture someone you love for just a moment. A real, live, loving, quality picture of someone you love. And just feel that affection for just a moment. And allow yourself to almost allow your heart to open for just a moment to recognize that that loving expression is just a place in you, just for a second. And then let that go. Take a deep breath, please, and allow your eyes to open. So the dirty little secret about forgiveness is we're not looking for it. Because forgiveness exists in the part of you that you just touched for a moment. It's your open heart. It's your understanding that you love and are loved. And you forgive not to let anybody off the hook or not to say that horrible behavior is acceptable. You forgive because you don't want to give up access to your own heart. And every time we hold a grudge and every time our identity groups create grudges with other people, we are building blocks against the opening of our own heart. And then there's all the research of what that does neurologically and biologically, of how that obscures your mind from thinking, creates very rigid and limited patterns of problem solving. But if you live inside of a heart that doesn't open easily, then you forget that this world is a very challenging place, but it's also a place of great beauty. And the more you identify with the victim role of I have been harmed by something that's not my fault, the more you identify with that. It's not that that statement is wrong. The problem is how strongly we identify with that statement. The more you identify that statement, the less you have access to that part of you. And we live in a world with limited access to that part of themselves. And at some level, that's the mission that I see of conferences like that, of in so many walks of life reminding us to bring that part of us with us. You know, at work, at home, at school, waiting in line. And forgiveness is, unfortunately, like the graduate curriculum of that heart opening. Many of us have trouble with gratitude even, because that's the foundational practice upon which forgiveness rests. Gratitude is the anchor of positive psychology. It's an acknowledgement that this world that you were born into gives you a heck of a lot. That's what gratitude is. It's like recognizing the abundance in which you live, or I live. And that's much easier to find than peace after having been badly treated. But you will never find peace after being badly treated if you don't find some gratitude first. Because the way our nervous systems are situated and the way we have such unbelievably refined threat receptors. When we don't let stuff go, when we don't heal, then those threat receptors stay active and look for confirmation in the world outside of us how dangerous this world is. And since the world is dangerous, we find it. Forgiveness puts those receptors to bed a little bit, because it starts with honest appraisal of your own life. Gratitude has no meaning if it's not honest. What forgiveness emerges from is actual reality. There's no kumbaya, everybody feel good, let's just do this together and things will get better. They won't. Gratitude is a deep, deep look, honestly, at our lives. What are the blessings in it? What's the abundance? Where have people been kind to me? It's the part of our daily awareness that is lacking. And it's hard to do. But it's telling the truth about our life. That yes, I woke up. You get to a certain age and that's good enough. But yes, I woke up and I'm breathing. And my heart works and my legs work. And then I woke up and there's food in the refrigerator and I have running water. And then I have transportation and a job and people who care for me and something to do in this world. So any accurate reporting of our lives would have a significant piece of thank you in it, even though that's not sufficient. But without it, we see an enormous distortion, just an enormous distortion. And we're designed to misperceive reality, to be threatened, because, again, our nervous systems are there to keep you alive, but not to make you happy. So it lies to you all the time and finds everything that's wrong in your world to focus on. Because the only goal is get this thing through another day. But that's not happy. And it's not sufficient. And we all know it. And wealth doesn't help because it just simply raises the bar on what you think you need, rather than thank you. The other underpinning of forgiveness is compassion. We're all in this sinking ship together. Every one of us. No matter how privileged you might be, or no matter how privileged you think somebody else is, everybody's in the same boat with a lot of leaks. But compassion, one of the things we would teach in forgiveness, besides gratitude, when people would come in and have these horror stories. I mean, I've worked in places that are horrifying to just even know they exist in this world. But gratitude and then compassion, which is, this is part of the human condition. This is part of existential suffering. You know, the Buddhist Four Noble Truths. All existence is suffering because it's temporary and we don't control a lot and we cling to what we want. Those are the Buddhist truths. It's all temporary. Whatever you have will go away. Everything you have will go away. And we cling. We want what we want to stay, and we want what we don't want to go away now. So we suffer. And everybody suffers. I mean, I'm not comparing the content. I'm talking about the similarity of process. You know, I've done forgiveness work with people who have had their children murdered in political violence. I've done forgiveness work after the attacks on 9/11 at the United Nations. So this is not trivial or frivolous, but it's still, no matter what you have suffered, you can say thank you for what you have, and you can recognize that your suffering is not unique. And one of the predictors that I had as a forgiveness teacher was how unique people thought their suffering was. The more unique they thought it was, the less likely they were to heal. So we would talk to them about, well, this is your suffering. We'd have a group, and this is their suffering. And somebody would say, well, my suffering is worse than your suffering. And then somebody else would say, well, yeah, it might be worse than their suffering, but it's not worse than my suffering. And let me tell you for 12 hours what my suffering is. That's how we make ourselves miserable, not by life. It's not life that does it. Life contributes, but it's not life. Life is what it is, and it's always been this way, always. Nothing's changed. You know, I remember I took a vacation to Bali like a decade ago, and it was lovely. I mean, you know, palm trees and warm water and all sorts of stuff. And I loved the sunshine, but as I'm sitting there, I'm recognizing that, you know, two of the world's major religions that focus on suffering, Buddhism and Hinduism, were formed right at that same water. I mean, the other side of it, but there's no place to go on this earth that doesn't have the human experience with it. And so if we can cultivate a little bit wider lens to a little more easily say thank you. You know, there was a slide here about gratitude. Say thank you a little more. And compassion, which the gentleman talked about. Open your heart a little. It's not just your suffering. It's the suffering. And it's inherent, as all the wisdom traditions of the world have said, it's inherent in how your mind and heart process your life. Because at some level, life is just what it is. And you're going to live and you're going to die. And there's a lot of things you don't control. So two of the things that we have to control are gratitude and compassion. We can work on that. Nobody's perfect. We can work on it. I met Desmond Tutu once, many years ago, at a conference. And I had thought to myself for years, how could somebody do that job that he did? You know, the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. How could you do that? How could you deal with that kind of cruelty? And then have the stories be told and say, okay, we're going to somewhat wipe that slate clean. So I met him at a forgiveness private talk. And he was like an ebullient person. I mean, he just, positive energy just jumped off his skin. And he had a huge picture, either a crucifix or of Christ right here. He was a minister. And you could see the deep faith he had, that there's something deeper than just what's right and wrong, and his own happiness. But his happiness was forged in suffering, not in trivialities. You know, he had that happiness of depth and grit, which is, I'm strong enough to go into the world and try to help it. That's how you know happiness. Going off on a yacht somewhere is not happiness. But I remember, and this was the title that I offered to give to this talk, was his book and his philosophy. Without forgiveness, there is no future. And what he means by that is simple and profound. Without forgiveness, you simply repeat your past. Like, without forgiveness, you remember your parent who may not have loved you the way you wanted, and then you bring that out into your current world. Think about that. All those stories of victimhood that we have, I had a lousy mother, I had a terrible ex, somebody hurt me, they're all true. So forgiveness doesn't wipe truth away. It can't. But it repositions it into a world where you're grateful for what you have, you recognize the inherent nature of suffering, and you have contextualized your suffering to some degree as a normal but painful human experience. Because, and this was the genius of that, without forgiveness, I'm not open to today. I'm stuck in my past. I'm not capable of seeing quite enough the beauty around me. I'm not quite capable of seeing it because I'm processing it through my victimhood, my having been harmed extraordinarily and unnecessarily by a world that harms us all. And we contribute to that harm. I mean, we're not innocent bystanders. That world in pain is not from them, it's from us. And every time you don't forgive, and every time you still talk negatively about some other human being, you're contributing to that suffering, and you're contributing to the human difficulty. And it takes great courage to want to stop contributing that. It's really hard to say, the buck actually stops with me. So when Desmond Tutu, from the best I can understand, was listening to months of horror, of how people had been just abused and mistreated, and he's, besides having that equanimity and religious faith, he was trying to heal his world. He was trying, with his centeredness, was trying to heal his community, and it doesn't come from resentment and bitterness. There's no healing there. But the thing that he knew, or all the people who started this, that they knew was, and all the mindfulness is all around that, you don't avoid suffering, you hold it, and you speak it, and you allow it to be part of your truth, and then you let it go. That's what we're designed to do. We're designed to hold it, and speak it, and own it, and let it go. Not just hold it and speak it and own it, but let it go. So that without forgiveness, say, our family is in the past. You know, grandma might have been awful. Dad might have been terrible. But the way to go from terrible to there's a new opportunity somehow is I have to disidentify with that person that for too long identified as harmed. Part of that is speaking my truth. Part of that is sharing it, digesting it, understanding it. But as significant is let it go. And it's not that you let go of the memory. You can't, what am I going to tell some parent that, oh, by the way, forget that the kid that you had was killed? Impossible and cruel. But you let go of victim status. And you rejoin the world now, hopefully with some desire to help other people because you know what it's like to suffer. That's what our suffering is for in a world that needs to heal itself. We suffer so that we metabolize it And instead of choosing to pay it forward, which so many of us do, we forgive and let it go. That's I think, what Desmond Tutu meant, that without forgiveness, there is no future. There would be a future. It will just be a very hostile one. I thank you all.